Hey fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. If you're watching on SIFTD, thank you. We appreciate your patronage via Patreon. If you're watching a week later on YouTube, it would really help out a lot. We can keep producing these. If you could link your Twitch Prime account to this YouTube channel, that will get Prime, Amazon, to donate a little bit each month to Shane. Just remember each month to renew your subscription via Twitch Prime and we will get paid. I won't get paid, but Shane will. Our first question from Patreon from Blurry Knight. What game do you think will get the most Game of the Year awards in 2018? That's a great question. Red Dead Redemption 2, Fortnite, or something else? Yeah, I don't even know anymore how many Game of the Year awards there are. There's probably 100. The truth is, if game reviewers are honest, they're going to give the Game of the Year to the highest rated Game of the Year. But Smash Brothers doesn't tend to get, Zelda type 98 reviews. So my guess is at the end of the year, Red Dead's going to be the best rated game. I was pretty adamant that Fallout 76 was going to get in the 90s and it got in the 50s. So it's not going to be a contender. I think it's fair for some people to give Fortnite Game of the Year because Shane and I were just talking about this off camera. It is the most impactful Game of the Year, probably of the century. So I get that Fortnite has changed the way we all think about games. It has brought, tens of millions of people into gaming that didn't play before. And so on some dimension, it's fair to say it is the Game of the Year because it's such a phenomenon. It's such a crazy force of nature. If you're just rating this, voting based on the best quality Game of the Year, without question, it is Red Dead Redemption 2. So, again, I'm not sure what the right metric is, but I would say Red Dead wins more awards than any other game this year by kind of a lot. Our next question from Patreon from Christopher Fryer. We often hear that video game press events are catered to investors and not consumers. Who are those investors? Are they millionaires chomping on cigars, or is it a ploy to get the common man to purchase stock? Why not have separate investor meetings so the enthusiast crowd doesn't get in an uproar over products intended for casual players? Wow, that's a really complicated, multi-level question, and I'm not sure your premise is correct. So, to be honest with you, video game press events seldom involve investors, but they do at E3, but not elsewhere. BlizzCon, if you want to call that a video game press event, there's probably a dozen investors there, or maybe even 125,000 fans. So no, I don't know how to explain this, but most investors rely on guys like me, and they don't actually attend video game press events, and they ask guys like me to interpret it for them. But let me make this a little more simple. If a video game company seeks to raise capital, meaning they're private and they're looking to raise money, then they want to cater to the people who are going to give them that money. If they are public, and meaning they're already a public entity and making profits, they seek to cater to the people who fund, their game development, which is the consumer. And the only reason that investors are included at all in those events is that, little known secret, investors actually own the company. Any shareholder that owns 1,000 shares of Activision at $50, you have $50,000 of investment. And the fact is, 100% of their stock is owned by investors. And so the investors are the ones who expect them to make a profit, and the investors hope that that profit will result in reinvestment in the business and higher profits, and the stock will go up. So their investors are their owners. Millionaires, yeah, a whole lot of them are. If you look at the vast majority of shareholders, yes, millionaires. I read something, and I think this is right, but you guys can check. 85% of Americans have like less than 1 year of 1 year of salary and savings. I think it's 85%. So, let's just say the average household income is like $70,000, it's something like that. If 85% of households have less than $70,000 in savings, they're not millionaires chomping on cigars. But, the other 15% have more than that. And the top 1% probably control, 80% of all savings. And so, yep, they're millionaires. Our next question from Patreon from Gregor Gulwy. Why is it so important for a public company to release an unfinished game before a financial year ends instead of pushing it a few months to make it better and likely gain more sales? Can the stock market sometimes sabotage quality? Stocks go up or down based on whether managements exceed expectations or fail to meet expectations. So if a company exceeds expectations, stock goes up. If the company meets expectations, it moves sideways. And if they fail to meet expectations, it drops. So your question presupposes that a company sets expectations and they're wrong. So for example, our game will launch in November, and then November comes and the game's not ready. Well, how do you meet expectations if the game's not ready? You launch it when it's not ready. So the fix to this is not delay the game a few months. The fix to this is don't announce that it's coming in November if you aren't sure it's going to be ready by November. Take-Two are masterful at this. They are the best at this. They set no expectations. They do not announce something until they're sure. And even with that, they messed up on Red Dead. They announced it and they still pushed it out. They announced, cracks me up, a sequel to a major 2K franchise 2 years ago and said it was coming this year, and then a year ago said, oops, it's not coming this year, it's delayed. We all know it's Borderlands. They never said it, and because they didn't say it, it didn't actually get delayed because they never really announced it. So, they're good at that because without telling us what the game is, like I got asked recently, how many units do you have for Borderlands 3 next year? And I'm like, you mean the sequel to the major 2K franchise that shall not be named? And I'm like, you can't put it in your model. If you look at my model for Take-Two next year, I have the same revenue every quarter. Because until they tell me what it is, how do I pop 10 million units of Borderlands in a quarter when I don't even know when it's coming out or if it's Borderlands? So the truth is, Take-Two is good at not setting expectations too high. They're very good at managing expectations. And by managing, I mean keeping expectations low and consistently exceeding them. So they really have a happy group of shareholders. So, and again, props to them. That's the way to do it. Other companies, not so much. I mean, a lot of companies promise big stuff and then they can't deliver, and they constantly, depress their investors. So the answer is probably don't announce a game until it's pretty much in the can and you're sure it's coming. Where it gets to be a problem is annual installments. So FIFA, Call of Duty, WWE, you kind of have to bring those out every year. And if they screw up and they're not ready, that's a serious problem. Fortunately, Activision has managed the process, and EA with FIFA has managed the process. And the games get out on time and they're generally pretty good. But announce it and just don't put a date out there until you are sure. So, that's the fix. As far as, can the market sabotage quality? The market should not employ managements who can't hit expectations. If a CEO keeps promising and keeps failing, he will get fired. And so that's the fix. Our last question this week from YouTube from Christian. With games like God of War and Red Dead 2 taking 5 to 7 years to finish, should publishers concentrate on creating smaller games with smaller budgets? Wouldn't this allow them to release more high quality games with less financial risk and fill in the dead zones between big releases? Thanks in advance and happy holidays, and also happy holidays to you. Yeah, I mean, the answer is, would you rather see a game every 3 years that sells, let's just say, 3 million units, or a game every 10 years, and I'm saying this because the math is easy, that sells 10 million units? And the answer really is you should be neutral if you're a publisher. Every 3 years, 3 million units. Every 10 years, 10 million units. It's 1 million units a year. And you really should think about it that way. Now, the only difference in spend is your marketing budget, because you have to market a game every 3 years instead of once every 10. But realistically, investors would rather see more frequency and smaller units, because that makes the game more predictable. So one of the reasons that investors like EA is because sports titles come out every year. One of the reasons investors like Activision is because Call of Duty comes out every year. One of the things that makes Take-Two difficult to value is we don't know how often GTA comes out, and we're just not going to know. And Agent, we don't know if it's ever coming out. It's been canceled. And Midnight Club and Max Payne and LA Noire, are they ever coming out? So, Take-Two can brag about having all these amazing games that have performed well in the past, but we just don't know if they're ever coming out again. So, would Take-Two be a better company if GTA came out every 3 years and sold 10 million units every 3 years? Maybe. I think investors would like it better if they put out GTA and Red Dead and Max Payne and Midnight Club and LA Noire, and every one of those games sold between 5 and 10 million every time it came out, and they came out every 3 years, because there's literally 6 of them, and you would have 2 a year if they came out every 3 years. And so if you had a 10 million unit seller and a 5 million unit seller in a given year, and they have 6 total titles and they all came out every 3 years, 15 million, 15 million, 15 million predictable revenues. And then we can decide what we want to pay for the stock, because the revenues are so predictable. I mean, imagine if McDonald's was only open 1 year out of every 6. You can't invest in that business, because you have to re-educate consumers every time the game comes out. So that's the problem. And it's impossible to question the success of Grand Theft Auto. I mean, 100 million units, come on. And so the analogy, I think, is the film industry. Avatar came out, believe it or not, in 2009, and we're about to end 2018, and Avatar 2 hasn't been announced. It's a 10-year development cycle, and maybe 11. But man, the movie did $2 billion. So, okay. Would you rather have Avatar owned by Disney, and I think it's going to be owned by Disney now because that's Fox. Would you rather be owned by Disney and be like Star Wars and come out every 2 years? Well, it wouldn't do 2 billion, but it would do probably 400 or 500 million. Yes, Avatar would make more money. James Cameron's not going to do that. The problem with Avatar is if James Cameron doesn't do it, it doesn't happen. Arguably, you could make a lot of these games without the Housers being involved. And the Housers are the guys who insist upon perfection. And maybe that's what we're going to see at Blizzard. Maybe Mike Morhaime insisted on perfection and delivered it. And maybe with him stepping down as CEO of Blizzard, we see games come out more frequently. Blizzard was a 12-year development team, cycle. Maybe we start seeing games every 6 or 8 years, and that would be better. So as a consumer, I'd rather see games more frequently. As an investor, I'd rather see games more frequently. But I appreciate on the creative side that the creators want it to be the best experience possible, and they're perfectly happy, releasing them really late. Thank you for joining us on this week's Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net, I hope, and I hope you are watching as a Patreon patron. Thank you very much. If you're watching a week late on YouTube, please try to remember to link your Twitch account to your YouTube subscription, and we will get paid from Amazon every month, or Shane will. If you can't do either of those, I insist that you follow me on Twitter. And if you don't follow me on Twitter, I promise if you ask a question on Twitter, it won't get answered. So you got to be a follower, or I'm going to ignore you. At Michael Pachter, at Dinfire is Shane, at Sifted Games. Thanks very much. We'll see you next week. Let me give some advice to you out there. Don't wait to start saving. Sacrifice and save. I held up my iPhone. I don't have an installment plan. I pay cash for my phone. That's one way to save. So the iPhone installment plan is something like $25 a month. and you have to trade the phone in and you get no credit for it. So you're putting aside like literally like $600 to buy a new phone every 2 years, and they don't give you any trade in. Buy the phone and milk it for 3 years, or 4 years, and buy the less expensive phone. Buy the 10R instead of the 10S, and save your money. So don't pay full price for anything if you can afford it. This crappy white shirt that I'm wearing, I wait until the place who sells it puts them on sale for 70% off, which is 1 day a year, and I buy 30 of them. Just telling you, put $5 a week away in savings. Figure out a way to save it and don't touch it. And if you can put $50 a week, more power to you. If you can put $500 a week, more power to you. Put $2,000 a year away when you're 21, and by the time you're 65, you're gonna have $1 million. It's crazy. So do it, because it really does compound like that. It's crazy. I read the Game of Thrones books. Thank you, Hayden Walling at Nike, you prick, because he suggested I read them and didn't tell me that the series wasn't finished. So I spent, I read 5,000 pages of book and had no idea that it wasn't over. Anyway, George R.R. Martin started that book series in 1993, and he's written 5 novels in the Game of Thrones, this Song of Ice and Fire series. And the last one was 2010, and it didn't end. So if you're watching the Game of Thrones TV show, the show is at least 1 full season, maybe 2, past the last book. It's whenever Jon Snow got stabbed, that was the last book. That was like the last page of the last book. And the TV series is ahead of it. It's like, and George R.R. Martin is an old, heavyset guy who could drop any day now. He's in his late 70s. I mean, he could go any day now. It's like, and he's working on a new TV series. Like, where the hell is the end of these books? It kills me, that
he just put out a book,
but not on Game of Thrones.
But it's like a side story.
Right, it's a Game of Thrones universe, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not finishing this story. So my point is that it's counterproductive to start a story and not end it. And I will just tell you, when you're reading the books, which is different from the TV show, it's called The Song of Ice and Fire. It was clear to me from the first time they introduced Jon Snow, and the first time they introduced what's the Khaleesi's name, Daenerys, Daenerys Targaryen. When they introduce those, she's fire and he's ice, Song of Ice and Fire, they're going to come together and unite the kingdoms. And that was kind of the last past season of Game of Thrones. They finally came together. It was clear to me from the very first page, but 5,000 pages later, and they hadn't met yet. And I'm just like, when is this thing going to end? So I think that book series would have been great if the guy had written 500 pages every year instead of 5,000 pages over 17 years, even 300 pages every year. If he had just released each one, when he finished the last 300 pages, it would have been a better story, and they would have made more money, but whatever.